46th President of the United States, President Joe Biden. Just big picture questions about the pandemic and where we are right now.
Sure.
When is every American who wants it going to be able to get a vaccine?
By the end of July of this year. When we came into office, there was only 50 million doses that are available. We have now, by the end of July, we'll have over 600 million doses, enough to vaccinate every single American.
But now the Biden White House is gloating about that very same vaccine program. Today, proudly telling reporters 1.7 million doses are being administered every week. By the way, it was already 1.1 million a day when President Trump left office.
What we did, we got into office and found out the supply, there was no backlog. I mean, there was nothing in the refrigerator, figuratively and literally speaking.
You know, what I explained to the mayors, there was no stockpile, right? It's, in many ways...
No stockpile
of vaccines, right? So we're looking at this, there was no national strategy or plan for vaccinations. We were leaving it to the states and local leaders to try and figure it out. And so in many ways, we're starting from scratch.
Okay, so that's just a lie. They are not starting from scratch. They are not close to starting from scratch. It's just untrue.
Is the Biden administration starting from scratch with the vaccine distribution effort, or are you picking up where the Trump administration left off?
No, I mean, we certainly are not starting from scratch because there is activity going on in the distribution.
As a result of Operation Warp Speed, Pfizer announced on Monday that its China virus vaccine is more than 90% effective. This far exceeds any and all expectations. Nobody thought they'd get to that level. And we have others coming which we think will be at equal level, maybe more if that's possible. In July, my administration reached an agreement with Pfizer to provide $1.95 billion to support the mass manufacturing and distribution of 100 million doses.
I can announce that we will increase overall weekly vaccination distributions to states, tribes, and territories from 8.6 million doses to a minimum of 10 million doses.
We're starting from scratch.
We certainly are not starting from scratch.
And the biggest thing, though, as you remember, when you and I shouldn't say it that way, as you remember, but when you and I talked last, we talked about it's one thing to have the vaccine, which we didn't have when we came into office.
Big Pharma ran millions of dollars of negative advertisements against me during the campaign, which I won, by the way, but, you know, we'll find that out. Almost 74 million votes. We had Big Pharma against us. We had the media against us. We had big tech against us. Pfizer and others were way ahead on vaccines. You wouldn't have a vaccine if it weren't for me for another 4 years because FDA would have never been able to do what they did, what I forced them to do.
We love you!
After a week of crowded indoor parties at the White House and increasingly outlandish claims about the election, President Trump took aim at his own administration today, slamming the FDA as a, quote, big, old, slow turtle that's taking too long to approve the COVID vaccines. And now Joe Biden is urging Americans to have confidence in the people and the process behind the development and approval of the vaccines.
I want to make it clear to the public, you should have confidence in this. There's no political influence. These are first-rate scientists taking their time looking at all of the elements that need to be looked at. Scientific integrity led us to this point.
And Pfizer and others even decided to not assess the results of their vaccine. In other words, not come out with a vaccine until just after the election. That's because of what I did with favored nations and these other elements. This includes a landmark executive order requiring drug companies to change Americans and charge Americans no more than they charge to foreign countries. So if Germany gets drugs at a very small or low price, and we're paying many times that price in the United States because we pay for all of the research, the development, the promotion, and other things, we will get what's called a favored nations clause we're going to have, and I signed a favored nations clause.
What will
Joe Biden put forth to counter what President Trump is trying to do, because lowering drug prices, I mean, that sells in America. Everybody wants to pay less for drugs.
Tonight, the president already taking executive action on the pandemic, immigration, climate change, and racial equality.
In an inauguration parade unlike we've ever seen, President Joe Biden exiting the beast, now with that license plate 46. Along the route, the Secret Service, National Guard, and reporters instead of a crowd of thousands of Americans.
I thought with the state of the nation today is no time to waste, get to work immediately.
In the Oval Office, wearing a mask, Biden signing 15 executive actions, many aimed at reversing his predecessor's policies.
These are just executive actions. They are important, but we're going to need legislation for a lot of the things we're going to do.
Biden lifts healthcare plan from insurance lobbyists. They probably wrote it at a dinner that they were having for him. The incoming president's plan mimics an insurance industry letter instead of pushing promised public option or Democratic legislation to expand Medicare. So he's not even going to get us a public option. They're not even going to do that, Ron. Instead, it adopts proposals, Joe Biden's healthcare plan, it adopts proposals from health insurance lobbying groups' recent letter to lawmakers demanding lucrative new subsidies for insurance companies at a moment when those corporations have recorded record profits as millions lose coverage and many face claim denials. Sounds eerily familiar. It's weird these insurance companies keep getting money and healthcare doesn't get any better. Isn't that weird?
Instead of their original plan to assess the data in October. So they were going to come out in October, but they decided to delay it because of what I'm doing. So they waited and waited and waited, and they thought they'd come out with it a few days after the election. I'm sure they would have found the ballot someplace, the Democrats and the group.
But a vaccinator, how do you get the vaccine into someone's arm? So you need the paraffin, you need the needle, you need the mechanisms to be able to get it in. You have to have people who can inject it in people's.
No shit, Sherlock.
No shit, Sherlock.
Your administration had set a goal to open the majority of schools in your first 100 days. You're now saying that means those schools may only be open for at least one day a week.
No, that's not true. That's what was reported. That's not true. It was a mistake in the communication. But what I'm talking about is I said opening the majority of schools in K through 8th grade because they're the easiest to open.
No shit, Sherlock.
No shit, Sherlock.
It's where mom steps in. Is this the type of stuff that you talk with our kids to see what black man is right, what black man is wrong, which black man did that and what black man did that? How about which white person did this and which white person did that? Did you ever think about that?
Well, actually,
because I don't feel as though that this conversation that you're having with our children is a good one, okay? I really don't, because it's 2020. You got racist ass motherfuckers that don't care. And now you're in school talking to my kids about George Floyd that ain't got nothing to do with this. You're having an ignorant, disrespectful conversation. He wasn't supposed to be honored. He wasn't supposed to be this. Are you saying this because you're white?
Oh. Tonight, while Governor Newsom is telling all of us to have Thanksgiving dinner outside, he's facing some new fallout for that fancy birthday dinner party he went to at the French Laundry.
Fox 11 in Los Angeles obtained these photos of the governor and his wife at a party in what the restaurant calls an outdoor section. It has walls on 3 sides and the 4th side is open. Nobody's faces were covered. Today, we learned 2 top executives from the California Medical Association were also among the 12 guests.
Well, I want to apologize to you because I need to preach and practice.
I've had Californians write to me desperate about the schools being closed, about their business, which was already on its knees, now having the boot of the state on its neck. Yet, for Gavin Newsom, it's like Mardi Gras or something.
First of all, don't talk about my mom like that unless you want to get your neck sliced.
I'll fucking grab you by your nipple and in front of your dad.
Shut up and be respectful. Stop.
So it's a great debate on when to transition to in-person learning. While there are numerous warnings not to be in large groups or to have dinner parties or small parties, why is it okay to put students and teachers in close proximity to each other for an entire day, day after day? And finally, do you believe all staff should be vaccinated before doing so?
Number one, nobody is suggesting, including the CDC in its recent report, that you have large classes, congested classes. It's smaller classes, more ventilation, making sure that everybody has masks and is socially distanced, meaning you have fewer students in one room.
But you know what? Are we alone?
Yeah.
If you're gonna call me out, I'm gonna you up.
They want to pick on us because they want their babysitters back.
Right. Right.
Right.
My brother had a delivery service for medical marijuana. The high clientele were parents with their kids in school. When you got your kids at home, no more Friday, no more smoke dog.
Uh-oh. We have the meeting open to the public right now.
Nuh-uh.
Okay, this is Mariah's mom, and I've been hearing you guys be so disrespectful.
Shut your bitch ass up. Get your ass to sleep, nigga. Go make some food with your fat ass.
Okay, first of all, I'm not fat, and you need to just stop.
So what, bitch? Shut the fuck up. So shut the fuck up. Shut up.
So disrespectful. You guys are gonna be.
So what, bitch? So what, nigga? So what? So what? Huh? Fuck you and your daughter, bitch.
Are you able to mute those who speak terrible?
So I'm looking at. Gotta grab her mom by her titties and slam her.
When protesters blocked Highway 101, then things took an ugly turn. The protesters were seen smashing the windows of just people in their cars and other vehicles in the area.
And then this, a dumpster set ablaze and a parked vehicle badly damaged. Protesters moved.
We are out here in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in front of one of several structure fires, this one being an office store on the street. The heat is so intense, we're going to go ahead and we're going to walk back this direction. To my left, you can see we're in front of a car lot, which has been completely vandalized by members. And if you actually want to take a look, over here, the correctional facility, as I showed you in our last video, has been completely engulfed in flames, but structures are not the only targets. As a dump, I think it was either a tow truck or a dump truck, has been targeted, and it actually exploded a little bit earlier.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Shit! Look at y'all stupid ass! Came out with a sword!
We have seen less than 3% of blacks and less than 5% of Hispanics given the total number of vaccines that have been administered to this point. Is this a priority for the Biden administration?
Well, first of all, it is a priority, number one. Number two, there's two reasons for it being the way it is. Number one, there is some history of blacks being used as guinea pigs in other experiments, as need not tell you, doctor, over the last 50 to 75 to 100 years in America. So there's a...
What the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry.
For 40 years, the U.S. government operated public health service conducted what was known as the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, one of the darkest chapters in American history. Syphilis was considered a national health crisis in the early 20th century.
You don't know a thing about syphilis, except that you've got it.
To study the disease, researchers found a population of poor, black, syphilitic sharecroppers in and around Tuskegee, Alabama during the Great Depression. Nearly 400 of the participants had syphilis, while another 200, the control group, did not.
Medical doctors deliberately let them die, wanted them to die for what they could discover from their bodies later. They should have been able to determine after the first 3 or 4 autopsies that the inside of a black person ravaged by syphilis looks identical to the insides of a white person, and stop the study.
The other thing we found is, and I'm sorry to go on, but this is really important to me, the other portion is a lot of people don't know how to register. Not everybody in the community, in the Hispanic and the African American community, particularly in rural areas that are distant and or inner city districts, know how to use know how to get online to determine how to get in line for that COVID vaccination.
Okay, this is Mariah's mom, and I've been hearing you guys be so disrespectful.
Shut your bitch ass up. Get your ass to sleep, nigga. Go make some food with your fat ass.
Gentlemen and ladies of the Senate.
One chapter receiving fresh scrutiny comes from his earliest years in the Senate, when he strongly opposed mandatory school busing. It was designed to achieve integration and a more equitable education. It was the mid-1970s. Biden favored desegregation, but not through busing. What's less known is how he followed the lead of some of the Senate's most fervent segregationists. In a series of never-before-published letters reviewed by CNN, the strength of Biden's opposition to busing comes into sharper focus. On March 25, 1977, Biden wrote, "My bill strikes at the heart of the injustice of court-ordered busing. It prohibits the federal courts from disrupting our educational system." Biden sought and received support from Mississippi Senator James Eastland, the Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and a leading symbol of Southern resistance to desegregation. He frequently spoke of blacks as, quote, an inferior race.
There are old comments from 1977 that had been unearthed, and in these comments, they quote Biden as saying that a, quote, non-orderly racial integration would cause his children to grow up in a racial jungle.
But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing.
Look, everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed. I've committed to spend $1 billion on public education to help people figure out how they can get in there. That's what we're also trying to set up.
So disrespectful. You guys are going to be...
So what, bitch? So what, nigga? So what? Fuck you and your daughter, bitch.
We inherited a circumstance here where, and now for the first, we did a lot in the first 2 weeks, in a circumstance where, number one, there weren't many vaccinators. You didn't know where you could go get a vaccine administered to you because there was no one to put it in your arm, number one. Number two, there was very little federal guidance as to say what to look for, how to find out where, in fact, you could go. So it's all about trying to more rationalize in detail so ordinary people like me can understand. I mean that sincerely. I mean, my grandchildren can use that online, make me look like I'm in the 7th century.
Death stalks you at every turn.
Grandpa?
Well, it does. There it is. Death!
It's only Maggie.
Oh, yeah. At my age, the mind starts playing tricks. So, death!
That's only the cat.
It was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Kamala Davy Harris, I solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of...
We wasted so much time. So much time.
My children, Layla, 8 here, and my son, Mateo, 7 at home, often ask if they will catch COVID, and if they do, will they die?
First of all, kids don't get COVID very often. It's unusual for that to happen. Number two, we haven't even done tests yet on children as to whether or not the certain vaccines would work or not work or what is needed.
Poor Homer. This world was never meant for one as beautiful as you. Get
when do you think this pandemic is, when is it going to be done? When are we going to get back to normal?
I think a year from now, I think that there'll be significantly fewer people.
French toast, please.
Is it coma painful?
Oh, heck no! You relive long lost summers, kiss girls from high school. It's like one of those TV shows where they show a bunch of clips from old episodes.
Are you committed to passing $1.9 trillion bill, or is that final number still up for negotiation?
You may recall I managed the last experiment we had with the stimulus, and it was no, I don't mean it that way, but it was $800 billion. We can come back, we can come roaring back. It is estimated that if we pass this bill alone, we'll create 7 million jobs this year. 7 million jobs this year. I remember you and I talking during the campaign, and you had the former guy saying that, well, we're just going to open things up, and that's all we need to do. And we said, no, you got to deal with the disease before you deal with getting the economy going. Well, the fact is that the economy now has to be dealt with. And what is it? Look at all the people. You have over 10 million people unemployed. We need unemployment insurance. We promised to look at all the people who are on the verge of being kicked out of their apartments because they cannot afford the rent. What happens when that happens? Everything being...
Hey, everybody. We have 4 spots left, and that's all. Yeah, just 4. That's it.
Come on, man. Come on. Come on, what? Wait, hey, that's my spot. Come on, don't do this to me. Don't.
Break it up. Stop. Get out of line. Both of you. Both of you.
I was here first. They told me that we had to be here on time. I got here on time. I was in line. I came from work. I got my son. I was here on time. We were here on time.
The homeless are now the biggest source of guests for many New York hotels. Rehoused here in the pandemic, it's offered more space and safety than typical shelters.
Can you tell us what's going on in Venice Beach with homelessness?
It has been complete lawlessness and just a breakdown of civilization. There are people who are living in tents, RVs. They are surrounded in their filth. There's feces. There's needles on the floor. They're living in squalor. Controller Ron Galpern did an audit of Prop HHH and found that 30 to 60% of the funds were used towards soft costs. So that's consultants, architects, and it didn't actually go to housing. I see it as just a big racket where everybody has their hand in the pot. It turns out that the homeless are just big job creators. Everybody is making money off of this very vulnerable population. So these group of key players, they don't really care what happens to these people. They have no incentive to solve this crisis because if they did, they would not have a job.
President-elect Joe Biden, he's laid out his new massive $1.9 trillion COVID relief plan. It includes money for testing, vaccines, opening schools, and direct payments to millions of Americans. Welcome back. President Biden's $1.9 trillion relief plan includes $350 billion in emergency aid to state and local governments. They say they need the money because their budgets have been decimated by the pandemic. That does sound plausible, but is it true? Let's take my home state of California as an example. Last year, despite the pandemic, California general fund tax revenues were 30% above forecast, with tax revenues through the month of November 2020 actually higher than the previous year when there was no pandemic and no lockdowns. So why do we need to shovel more money their way from US taxpayers? It's not to help California workers or families or small businesses. It's to bail out the government unions that have a political stranglehold on the Democrats who control California.
This Biden's final pitch to Georgia. He was trying to get the guy trying to get Democratic control of the Senate. Vote blue and $2,000 checks will go out the door immediately. Critics say Biden's COVID relief plan breaks the promise of $2,000 stimulus checks. No malarkey, more like whoa malarkey, am I right? Yep. The incoming president says the $1,400 payment will top off the second round of $600 checks, which were guaranteed at the end of 2020, bringing the total to $2,000 per person, he says. Yeah, we wouldn't want to give you a one-time payment that's more than what the other countries have been getting monthly for almost a year. What is this? Is this an actual country or something?
You're proposing a $15 minimum wage. Given the lower cost of living, specifically in the Midwest, many business owners are concerned that this will put them out of business, forcing them to downsize or cut benefits.
It's about doing it gradually. We're at $7.25 an hour. No one should work 40 hours a week and live in poverty.
The Congressional Budget Office says that a $15 minimum wage would lift 900,000 people out of poverty, but would also cost 1.4 million people their jobs.
What will you do so that small mom and pop businesses like ours will survive over large corporate entity?
You may remember there was a guy running saying, what's going to happen is the banks aren't going to lend you the money. They're going to ask you a question. Do you have your credit with us? How many loans do you have with us? What credit cards do you have with us? Because even though they were being underwritten and we bailed their rear ends out last time out, it was too much trouble to lend to you.
Our most urgent task upon taking office was to shore up the same banks that helped cause this crisis. But when I ran for president, I promised I wouldn't just do what was popular. I would do what was necessary.
I was concerned about the stock market activity we're seeing around GameStop, and now with some other stocks as well.
Well, I'm also happy to repeat that we have the first female Treasury Secretary and a team that's surrounding her, and often questions about market we'll send to them. But our team is, of course, our economic team, including Secretary Yellen and others, are monitoring the situation.
Listen, the name of the company is Robinhood. It's supposed to steal from the rich and give to the poor. They did the exact opposite. And we find out they're selling information to the hedge funds. These guys are the biggest frauds of all time. And again, I keep saying it, but it's criminal, and they belong in jail once we figure out what actually happened and why they did what they did. It wasn't to protect their clients. Get out of here. How stupid do they think we are?
I mean, the effects of that decision they made to stop trading, and specifically, they didn't stop people from selling. They only stopped people from buying. So they shut down one side of the trade. And the effect of that was we had these hedge funds from Wall Street. They were on the ropes, right? I mean, let's discuss who these guys are. These are the apex predators of Wall Street. They are in the business of shorting companies to destroy them. I mean, that is their business model. And they are not academic traders, okay, who are just speculating on outcome. They engineer the outcome, right?
Actually invested in a company that literally they got on television yesterday and they fucking lied to Americans right to their face. This is a company that was insolvent. Because now let's just put a pin in the following data point, which I believe to be true. I live in these markets. Okay, so I understand what it means to be putting on trades, to being short, to being gamma squeezed, to have longs, to do all of this risk management.
Right? You know, it's
well, I mean, whether you're a Reddit trader or an institutional trader, you crave research, Mark, and that's what the banks sell. That's what analysts sell. There's value in that.
No, I'm not saying there's not value in it, but I'm saying if I'm a client of your research firm and I pay you for that, great. But when you go on CNBC and talk up your book, you're saying, okay, I'm creating more demand to create an exit or just to inflate the price. When in reality, if you truly were an owner and you had additional capital, you'd want that price to be as low as possible because you want to own as much of the company as possible.
We like the stock. We like the stock. We like the stock. We like the stock. But they're very smart about what to target.
Wait a minute. What you just said, target. So here's my question. How is it that they can target, and that's legal, and if there was in the old days a bear raid, that was illegal? When does this become manipulation, Jim?
It's such a tough question because remember, what's manipulation? How about if an analyst came out right now and said, I think GameStop is going to 250? Would we give that person a pass? Yes, because of the First Amendment. We like the stock. We like the stock. I mean, that's Facts. How is that bad?
I could argue, I don't even know if there are foreign powers at work here behind the scenes trying to make chaos of our markets.
Let me ask you this, Jim, because I think Mike Santoli...
What I love about this is it brings together Russiagate now. So now Russia is being used to try to smear these Reddit people. Watch this.
What kind of case do they have? We like the stock. We like the stock. I mean, how is that bad? Or
I could argue, I don't even know if there are foreign powers at work here behind the scenes trying to make chaos of our markets.
So they say, I don't even know if there's foreign powers manipulating, and then even Jim Cramer says, stop it. Even Jim Cramer had to say at that point. But you see...
And look at that guy's douchebag face like, when he got caught. Like, you know, he's not used to being told. He's like, look at that. Look at that stupid fucking face, knowing that he said something incredibly stupid that he's used to, like, having taken seriously. But
yeah, that would... So, again, it's... if we don't like something in America, you say it's Russia, it's Putin, we got to use censorship, it's radicals,
it's hate speech, it's hate speech,
it's hate speech. So if anything can be hate speech, by the way,
or harassment against the poor, hedge fund managers on their boats.
Because even though they were being underwritten and we bailed their rear ends out last time out, they weren't. It was too much trouble to lend to you.
Our most urgent task upon taking office was to shore up the same banks that helped cause this crisis.
As before the Senate voted to acquit the former president in the impeachment trial, you said you were anxious to see if Republican senators would stand up. Only 7 did. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the rest cowards. Do you agree with her?
For 4 years, all that's been in the news is Trump. The next 4 years, I want to make sure all the news is the American people. I'm tired of talking about Trump.
I worry about ongoing threats to our country from Americans who embrace white supremacy and conspiracies that align with it. What can your administration do?
I got involved in politics to begin with because of civil rights and opposition to white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, and the most dangerous people in America continue to exist. That is the greatest threat to terror in America, domestic terror. And so I would make sure that my Justice Department and the Civil Rights Division is focused heavily on those very folks. And I would make sure that we, in fact, focus on how to deal with the rise of white supremacy.
And the headline is a little shocking. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. So it's a very long article, and it talks about how all these people got together behind the scenes to make sure that Joe Biden won the election. And they talk about the ACLU, they talk about labor, getting together with the Chamber of Commerce and all these business people, and behind the scenes how they were all working together. This is from Time Frickin' Magazine. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. So that's what they're talking about, the shadow campaign. This is what they did. They worked behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. And just so you know, nothing to worry about. They weren't rigging the election. They were fortifying it. Do you want to know? And they did it all in secret, because that's how you fortify elections, by doing things in secret and not being transparent. And look at this. Here's a dinner with Mark Zuckerberg. That's Barack Obama. That's Steve Jobs. That's Zuckerberg. That's Steve Wesley from the Wesley Group. That's Andor, spouse of the partner from Kleiner Perkins. There's Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google. There's Art Levinson from Green Tech. There's Larry Ellison from Oracle. There's John Chambers from Cisco. There's Reed Hastings from Netflix. There's Carol Bartz from Yahoo. John Hennessy from Stanford. And there's Dick Costello from the Twitter. That's from Time Magazine. And they don't think this is they don't think this is a bad thing to tell people. Time Magazine thinks this is very cute Imagine if Trump said, hey, there's a secret cabal working behind the scenes to censor free speech that would hurt the Biden campaign. They would call him crazy. This is what Time Magazine is actually uncovering and almost bragging about.
And, I feel great that we're correcting some of the mistakes that were made.
You mentioned the new team. Was President Biden right to rejoin the WHO? And have you spoken to him recently, or will you?
I spoke to him, Melinda and I, soon after the election, and the pandemic was definitely one of the key topics there. And we're thrilled that he's rejoined the WHO, because that's where you share best practices.
And I came up on a Saturday morning because I was fascinated with the Senate. And they had a Saturday session. I walked up those days, no guards stopping you everywhere. And they just got out of session. I walked in the back. All of a sudden, I found myself in the chamber, and I was stunned. I walked up, sat down, the presiding officer's seat. Guy grabbed me by the shoulder, said, "You're under arrest." Literally 9 years later, as I walked onto the Senate floor through the same door, that same guy, cop, said to me, "Senator, you remember me?" And I said, "Geez, I don't." He said, "I arrested you 9 years ago."
Wow. How about
he
that?
Said, "Welcome back."
Yeah, welcome back.
The truth is, our leaders don't have answers. They don't even have explanations for what's going on. Worse than that, they themselves are deeply implicated in the systemic problems, in some cases the crimes that are dragging the country down. They know all this. They know their guilt. Here's the thing. They know that you know it too. And that's why they're afraid. They know why populism is rising, and it is. Populism starts when people start to figure that out, and they have. And that's why everything suddenly feels so unstable right now, because once again, real populism is brewing. They're refusing to admit their role in the decline. They're refusing to admit their failures, and instead, they are blaming the people they have failed. They're literally declaring war on their own population. And if you think we're overstating it, we're not. Here's the former CIA director describing what the enemy looks like.
And this threat from domestic violence extremists is much more challenging, I believe, than it was in terms of going after foreign terrorists. The domestic violence extremists are much more pervasive. Their numbers are much larger. When we were going after Al-Qaeda or other types of terrorist groups, cells here in the United States, their numbers were in the single digits of dozens, and was finding needles in a haystack. Here, there are a lot of haystacks with a lot of needles in them. They have the wherewithal. They already have the weapons that, if they so choose to use them, they can in fact carry out these deadly attacks.
But John Brennan, the former CIA director, has isolated the real problem. The real problem is you. According to Brennan, anyone who disagrees with, say, Susan Rice is worse than Osama bin Laden and more dangerous. These people, meaning you, quote, have the weapons, these terrorists. By terrorists, Brennan means tens of millions of American citizens who might have a firearm at home and didn't vote for Joe Biden. They're the threat, and we need to hunt them as we hunted Al-Qaeda. You just saw the clip. That's what he said.
And that is a bulletin released to all law enforcement earlier this week, that there is, until the end of April, a persistent domestic terrorism and around this belief that the election was fraudulent, that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. All of those ideologies pushed by Donald Trump.
There's people who say there's no evidence, just are lying through their teeth, or they're deliberately ignorant or willfully blind to the truth.
At about 8 o'clock in the morning, we're going to roll this back and show it to you. There you go. So now they're going to start pulling these ballots out from under this table. This table, the black one, was placed there by the lady with the blonde braids at about 8:22 a.m. in the morning. So she put that table there. Yeah, I saw 4 suitcases come out from underneath the table. See the gentleman in the red. So he just pulled one out. So what are these ballots doing there, separate from all the other ballots? And why are they only counting them whenever the place is cleared out with no witnesses?
Is particularly this Dominion voting software. This was the software that was used in Michigan, and in Antrim County, they had Joe Biden up by thousands of votes. They claimed there was a software glitch. It was discovered, it was fixed, and then it turned out that President Trump was actually up by thousands of votes. We know that you and your team have been investigating this.
We have a person who's come forward with an affidavit inside of Dominion that has said that Dominion observed the 100,000 phony ballots that were brought in at 4 o'clock in the morning on November 5th that were all Biden ballots that appeared by every measure to be phony ballots since they were brought in the back door. They were not in the proper containers. They were sticking out of the paper bags and cardboard boxes. And they were told that these were ballots that were needed to catch up to Trump because Trump was too far ahead.
In November, the Democratic Party won everything, full control of the federal government. They seethed for years while they were out of power. That made sense. But winning seemed to enrage them even more. Did you watch Democrats on television today at the impeachment hearings? They are crazy person mad, florid-faced, irrational, yelling and making threats. It is bizarre. You'd think they'd get to work fixing the country they inherited. They promised to do that. Instead, they set about breaking things and hurting people. A free internet is their enemy. The moment they took power, they began a kind of counter-reformation against the free internet. They started the most sweeping mass censorship campaign in the history of this country. Yesterday, for example, Google pulled a pro-life news site off of YouTube. Why'd they do that? Simple. Google supports abortion. A lot of big corporations do. Children distract the labor force. If you're raising your family, you are not serving shareholders.
There are other options, including the fact that cable operators like Comcast and Charter, which send Fox out to hundreds of millions of people, they can demand some accountability in the way that Facebook and Twitter have done. And there's also, I think, the possibility of reviving the fairness doctrine.
And Tucker Carlson is telling viewers that this network, CNN, is trying to force Fox News off the air, which is patently false. But while some cry cancel culture, let me suggest a different way to think about this. A harm reduction model. But reducing a liar's reach is not the same as censoring freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is different than freedom of reach.
It's not a fascist crackdown on free speech by ruthless and power-mad billionaires. No, not at all. It's just harm reduction, like methadone or Nicorette. It's a way to get better. When they come for you, they will talk like social workers. Guaranteed.
Hello, useless eaters. As your unqualified, non-elected global human health overlord, I'd like to take this opportunity to flaunt my position of power and influence over society and share some of my plans for you and your future. When I amassed my fortune in computer software, I demonstrated that I was willing to lie, steal code, cheat my partners, and exercise monopolistic control to destroy my competitors. Now that I've retired, I can rebrand myself as a humanitarian. With my for-profit foundation masquerading as a charity, I can advocate for population reduction and sponsor mass human experiments with unproven vaccines in vulnerable populations. Like my father, a powerful banker, eugenicist, and Rockefeller crony himself, it's always been my ambition to decide who lives and, more importantly, how many have to die. Whether it's under the guise of climate change or world health, it's really all about controlling and culling the human herd for fun and profit.
Yeah, and it's self-destructive because the government is destroying the sanctity of their own edicts. So people say to themselves, I don't think I really need a vaccination, or I don't really understand why I can't do this, or I should wear this, or I should quarantine this, when you're letting literally thousands of people come in with a standard that you don't apply to them, but you do to your own citizens, as if his citizenship is a disadvantage. And so while all this is going on, Laura, there's a lot of things that we're not talking about. We're $28 trillion in debt. We're going to borrow another $2 trillion. Are we going to inflate our way out of it? Are we going to have stagflation? Are we going to have permanent zero interest rates? We're really changing the way we do business in government. We never had one party say to the other party, that fringe candidate or that fringe member can't be in a committee. Or we've never had a situation where we're impeaching somebody out of office and the Chief Justice won't be presiding over. These are radical ideas. And then Drew, I'll start with you. Is your YouTube channel still demonetized? I know you were demonetized for a while, which people think is just about money, but actually when you get demonetized, that hurts you in the algorithm and then you get less views and everything else. Where are you at with that? And why did it happen?
I was in some sort of 1 week deplatforming. I was actually, and threatening with permanent deplatforming. I was sent a list of policies that are not to be violated, and they were nowhere near anything I was talking about. The only thing that came close that I could imagine is I had COVID and I was discussing the status as measured of my immunity, and somehow discussing immunity is touchy for them.
Zubin,
right.
you had problems. Let's put YouTube aside for a moment. You had some problems with Facebook in the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, and we're on all these platforms as well. And on Facebook, I suddenly got a message on the back end in my creator side that said, oh, this page is at risk for being depublished because of violations of community standards. And I got no such notifications, had no clue. And when you click appeal, it's grayed out. So you have no recourse. And on top of that, the concern was the entire page. So that's a 2.2 million person following thing that we've built over 10 years. They were basically saying, oh, tomorrow it could be gone with no explanation. And
I got to tell you, this is what exercises me. And my son is a law student, got very worked up about this, that we are board certified in internal medicine. I have 35 years of practice in medicine. I'm having a conversation with a colleague, and non-medical professionals are determining what is appropriate for a physician conversation in the public sphere, which is anathema. It's bizarre, and there's so many things wrong with that, I can't even begin to talk about.
Wait.
What will your administration do to correct these wrongs that we witnessed not just in Kenosha, but across this country?
My son, by the way, was a great prosecutor. He was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware, and he was a federal prosecutor before that. And so I'm not condemning all prosecutors, but I am saying that it matters that you have adequate defense and you are able to attract people who, in fact, can live on being able to be that public defender. I think we have to deal with systemic racism that exists throughout society.
Well, people who use America, corporations who use America, groups of people who use America for a stepping stone for more powerful position in the rest of the world. I mean, face it, there's people who are trying to gain control of the entire world now.
Senator Biden, it's nice to have you here. As the youngest member of the Senate, the one, therefore, who may expect the longest career there, I wonder if you'd say to us, since it's clear that you're not corrupt and you got elected, why should people think that the system produces corrupt results when there you are?
Well, I'm not sure you should assume I'm not corrupt.
Well, I'm not sure you should assume I'm not corrupt.
Well, I'm not sure you should assume I'm not corrupt. But thank you for that, though. The system does produce corruption, and I think implicit in the system is corruption, when in fact, whether or not you can run for public office, and it costs a great deal of money to run for the United States Senate, even from a small state like Delaware, you have to go to those people who have money, and they always want something. I think it's the most degrading experience in the world to have to go out and ask for money, because you know that unless you accidentally agree with the position taken by the person or group that has the money, that you run the risk of deciding whether or not you're going to prostitute yourself to give the answer you know they want to hear in order to get funded to run for that office. And it's coincidental in many instances when in fact you happen to agree with where they are.
Hunter Biden joined his father, Air Force Two, takes a trip to Asia. They stop in China. Literally less than 2 weeks later, Hunter Biden's company inked a $1 billion private equity deal with a subsidiary of the Chinese government's Bank of China.
We were told to look at Joe Biden as the model of integrity. We all know about Joe's son, Hunter Biden. A corrupt Ukrainian oligarch put Hunter on the board of his gas company, even though he had no experience in Ukraine or in the energy sector. None. Yet he was paid millions to do nothing. He only had one qualification that mattered. He was the son of the man in charge of distributing U.S. aid to Ukraine.
You didn't have any extensive knowledge about natural gas or Ukraine itself, though.
No, but I think that I had as much knowledge as anybody else that was on the board, if not more.
In the list that you gave me of the reasons why you're on that board, you did not list the fact that you were the son of the vice president.
Of course, yeah, no.
What role do you think that played?
I think that it is impossible for me to be on any of the boards that I just mentioned without saying that I'm the son of the Vice President of the United States.
And recently reported information revealed that a few months after Hunter Biden joined that corrupt company's board, the Obama-Biden State Department began doing business with them, even when it remained under investigation for corruption. And it gets worse. That very same company was being investigated by a Ukrainian prosecutor. Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States, threatened to withhold aid to Ukraine unless that same prosecutor was fired.
They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
President Trump,
and I have to respond to that.
Please,
because look,
very quickly.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this where you're going? This is where he's going. The laptop is Russia.
Gentlemen, I want to stay on the issue of race.
You have to be kidding. Here we go again with Russia.
The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. And it talks about how all these people got together behind the scenes to make sure that Joe Biden won the election. This is from Time Frickin' Magazine. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. So that's what they're talking about, the shadow campaign.
Defund the police is discussed as an option for reforming policing. However, there are communities where people live in fear, not of the police, but in fear of the violent gangs who commit crimes in those neighborhoods. How can we be sure that we don't over-legislate police officers so that they can't do their job to protect the law-abiding citizens who live in these high-crime neighborhoods, and yet train officers to police with compassion?
By number one, not defunding the police. We have to put more money in police work. So we have legitimate community policing, and we're in a situation where we change the legislation. No one should go to jail for a drug offense. No one should go to jail for the use of a drug. They should go to drug rehabilitation. Drug rehabilitation.
Our president is, he's tough and outspoken, and he has the courage to challenge the old way. That's right. He's the one who's actually fighting to bring real change. That's why he gets so much pushback. But notwithstanding being tough, he's also a man with a kind heart. That's right. He sees wrong and he tries to right it, just like he did in the case of Alice Marie Johnson. Mm-hmm. You know who she is, the grandmother from Alabama who served 21 years in prison on a life sentence as a first-time nonviolent drug offender. A life sentence as a first-time nonviolent drug offender. The first step, let it all of them come forward. Alice Marie Johnson's case is probably one of the better illustrations that shows how the federal criminal justice system disproportionately discriminates against African Americans and people of color, and how the 1994 crime bill has led to the over-sentencing and to the creation of what the author Michelle Alexander has called the new Jim Crow in America.
The year 1994.
The next thing I saw was people falling down and gunshots.
America's cities facing soaring crime. A new law seen by many as the best way to fight back.
Let us roll up our sleeves to roll back this awful tide of violence.
That 1994 crime bill, it did contribute to mass incarceration in our country.
The other big piece of legislation on Capitol Hill tonight is the crime bill.
But we also have to have an organized effort against gangs, just as in a previous generation we had an organized effort against the mob. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And the President has asked the FBI to launch a very concerted effort against gangs everywhere.
It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
What's your view on the crime bill that you wrote in 1994, which showed prejudice against minorities?
Well, first of all, things have changed drastically. That crime bill, when it voted, the Black Caucus voted for it. Every black mayor supported it across the board. And it didn't. The crime bill itself did not have mandatory sentences except for. That's why I'm offering $20 billion to states to change their state laws to eliminate minimum mandatories. Two things. It had 3 strikes and you're out, which I voted against in the crime bill, but it had a lot of other things in it that turned out to be both bad and good. I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. That was part of it, the assault weapons ban and other things that were good. What I was against was giving states more money for prison systems that they could build, state prison systems. And you have 93 out of every 100 people in jail now is in a state prison, not in a federal prison, because they built more prisons. I also wrote into that bill a thing called drug courts. I don't believe anybody should be going to jail for drug use. They should be going into mandatory rehabilitation. We should be building rehab centers to have these people housed.
And the truth is, we don't very well know how to rehabilitate them at that point. That's the sad truth. I'm the guy that said rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it and notice it. And even when we notice it and we know it occurs, we don't know why. So you cannot make rehabilitation a condition for release. That's why in our system, there's the federal system, you serve 85% of your time. It's a shame, but we don't know how to rehabilitate.
Can't raise kids in an environment where this is all they know and they're surrounded by it, and then think that somehow they are going to be immune from the influences that they're seeing every day. Right. It's what you were saying about your brother, just like, oh, well, and my big bro, he's going to prison. Then he starts thinking, I'll probably end up at some point going to prison and I'll be okay.
Well, as he has said, look, we have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners. We spend $80 billion a year on prison. Those are the statistics. What the president wanted to do by going to El Reno is put a spotlight on the people.
I joined with a group of people in the House to provide for changing the system from punishment to rehabilitation. Along with a guy named Arlen Specter, who you may remember, I wrote the Second Chance Act.
In the meantime, an awful lot of people were jailed for minor drug crimes after the
Exactly right.
Was it a mistake to support it?
Yes, it was. But we did a study. And we determined what happens if, for the first, second, third offense, for any crime in the criminal justice system, at the federal level, if you're a black man, it's the first time you committed robbery. How long would you go to jail on average? If you're a white man, how long? Black man would go to jail on average 13 years. White man, 2 years.
Another thing about how perspectives change over time. Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, I'm ashamed that I voted for the '94 crime bill. You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted the bill, as you remember.
I know that.
And by the way, we talk about this mostly in terms of Black Lives Matter. Black lives really do matter. But the problem is institutional racism in America. That's the overarching problem that still exists. Where we change the system of sentencing system to one that relates to a notion of, they should tell you that, is related to making sure that what you do is you focus on making sure that there's rehabilitation. But here's the deal. There has to be much more serious, how can I say it, much more serious determination as to what the background and the attitudes of the recruit is, what their views are. There should be much more psychological testing, like you would if you go into the intelligence community. What is it? What are the things that make you respond the way you do? Because there is inherent prejudice built into the system as well. Is this new generation? They're not like us. They're thinking differently. They're more open. And we got to take advantage of it.
What are your immediate and tangible plans to address how deeply divided we are as a nation?
I take issue with what everybody says about the division. For example, my plan on COVID, 69% of the American people support it. The nation is not divided. You cannot function in our system without consensus other than abusing power at the executive level.
Disproportionately discriminates against African Americans and people of color, and how the 1994 crime bill has led to the over-sentencing and to the creation of what the author Michelle Alexander has called the new Jim Crow in America.
I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. Look, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
So you cannot make rehabilitation a condition for release. That's why in our system, there's the federal system, you serve 85% of your time. It's a shame, but we don't know how to rehabilitate.
Right. It's what you were saying about your brother, just like, oh, well, my big bro, he's going to prison. Then he starts thinking, I'll probably end up at some point going to prison, and that'll be okay.
You cannot function in our system without consensus other than abusing power at the executive level.
Tonight, the migrant caravan is growing. The group, fleeing violence and poverty in Central America, has pushed through Mexico's southern border, and many Mexicans are joining in as they move north. NBC's Mariana Atencio is there.
This is now a massive exodus of around 7,000 people, and they're making their way to Tapachula, which is the most important city here in the southern part of the country. It is a critical juncture for this caravan. It is where the prior caravan reorganized to move north to the United States.
We're going to keep moving forward, this man says. He's been traveling for more than a week with his 2-year-old daughter. Unlike Friday's clash at the border, now the Mexican government says it won't use force to stop the migrants.
Situation has changed dramatically. There's still hundreds of migrants coming down. Here we just see them spilling over, and they're trying to get up and above. Now, it's very difficult to do crowd estimates, but I would say easily more than 1,000 have crossed. That's the situation it is right now, David. We'll get back to you when we get a little bit more. Just to be clear, we are still on the Mexico side right here. On the other side right there, that is the U.S. border.
You want a pathway to citizenship for the roughly 11 million undocumented immigrants. Would you sign any immigration bill if it did not include that, a pathway for the roughly 11 million undocumented?
The vast majority of the people, those 11 million undocumented, they're not Hispanics. They're people who came on a visa, was able to buy a ticket to get in a plane and didn't go home. They didn't come across the Rio Grande and swim across, excuse me. and sorry, that's the Irish in me.
Has some issues with moderation. There are some incitement to violence examples on there, and they need to step it up on the moderation. And our hope is that they do that and get back on the store. We have terms of service for our app store, and some of those terms of service he's in violation of. All we're asking Gail is that he meet the terms of service.
Response by Amazon
to Parler's lawsuit sort of explains why they took them off of AWS, citing the company's unwillingness to remove content that, quote, plans the rape, torture, and assassination of named public officials and private citizens.
No free speech for racism, no free speech for genocide, no free speech for murder. It's basically ensconced in a series of rulings by the not by the Constitution. It's not in there, by the Supreme Court. And the idea that you are inciting the death of people has always been something that the Supreme Court, well, actually about 100 years, it's just the way it is. No, I mean, you're either in favor of genocide or you're against it.
As hundreds of thousands of Muslims disappear into giant secure facilities, China has begun taking a few selected journalists inside. These are places where adults wear uniforms, but sleep up to 10 a room, sharing a toilet, with no idea how many months or years it will be before they can return to their families.
I mean, you're either in favor of genocide or you're against it. He said our relationship with China is quite cordial because the Chinese government recognizes that the United States doesn't want to disengage with them. While this deal was being negotiated, the big fault line in the White House was between those who don't believe China can ever be redeemed, so why not just keep hitting them with tariffs forever to wreck their economy, and those who think that China can be a good trading partner if they're willing to play by the rules. I mean, you're either in favor of genocide or you're against it.
The Uyghur situation is shockingly undercovered.
Oh my God. Well, it demonstrates that when people said never again, they were full of crap. They're just full of crap. I mean, it's just not true. And this is one area where the United States should absolutely be taking a leading role. It is obvious that China is a nefarious actor. China has been stealing our technology. The Chinese government is attempting to extend its rule of tyranny over Hong Kong. They just subjected 7.5 million people to their direct tyranny in violation of treaty. And the response has basically been muted from the Western world.
We've been covering the protests in Hong Kong since they began and seen this modern metropolis descend into a city of fire as local citizens fight back against China's growing influence and control.
So just stay back and And did you see that video of the Chinese ambassador in Britain being asked on the BBC about that tape?
The Chinese government has sent more than 1 million Uyghurs, a Muslim minority ethnic group, to centres like this for what it calls voluntary job training. US officials have previously described them as concentration camps, and newly leaked cables reinforce reports that they are centres for forced ideological and behavioural re-education.
No, I didn't.
It's fantastic. So the BBC interviewer shows him the tape of the people being pushed onto trains, right? And he says, "What is this?" And the Chinese ambassador says, "I can't see it. I'm not sure what you're talking about." He's literally saying that the screen is huge. It's right behind him. Like he's looking right at it. And he acts as though he can't see it. And then he starts talking about the natural beauty of the region.
This is almost certainly over northern China, over Xinjiang. Can you tell us what is happening here?
I cannot see, this video. This is not the first time you show me. I still remember last year you showed me what is happening in Xinjiang.
In Xinjiang, exactly.
But let me tell you this. Xinjiang, have you been to Xinjiang yourself?
No, I never have.
You know, Xinjiang is regarded as the most beautiful place in Xinjiang. There's a Chinese saying, you do not know how big China is.
Ambassador, that is not beautiful coverage, however, is it?
Right? He won't deal with it. He won't explain what it is. And the rest of the world is just like, well, you know what.
9:30 next day, we met at the hospital gate and headed towards the Western Mountain execution ground. My chief surgeons then ordered and guided me, extracted the liver and 2 kidneys. The man was alive. He tried to resist my scalpel cut, but too weak to avoid my action. I thought I was carrying my duty to eliminate the enemy of the state. It is not acceptable that a normal buy one get one free shopping pattern can be seen in organ transplantation. Pre-date for your heart transplantation means that they make someone dead for you. Giving away organs to promote business means they have organ of plenty.
Now with a president who incited an insurrection. I mean, suddenly there are rules in this country. Hate them or like them, you're not allowed to. Insurrection's on the wrong side of history. It's against the Constitution. Yes. So suddenly you've got these companies, and they're waking up to the idea that they're part of the insurrection, and they can't be protected.
Hunter Biden joined his father, Air Force Two, takes a trip to Asia. They stop in China. Literally less than 2 weeks later, Hunter Biden's company inked a $1 billion private equity deal with a subsidiary of the Chinese government's Bank of China.
I remember you questioned me when I came back from China, and I said, I predict within less than a year they're going to end their one China policy.
I was born in 1985, 6 years before China announced its one-child policy. Right after I was born, the local officials came and ordered my mom to be sterilized. My grandpa stood up to the officials because he wanted a grandson to carry on the family name. Eventually, my parents were allowed to have a second child, but they had to wait for 5 years and pay a substantial fine. Growing up, my brother and I were surrounded by children from one-child families. I remember feeling a sense of shame because I had a younger brother.
And I got clobbered by saying, because that Biden didn't talk about the fact that how immoral it was, and it was when we were running against the Republican ticket led by Mitt Romney, a fine guy.
You just talked to China's president.
Yes, for 2 hours.
What about the Uyghurs? What about human rights abuse?
We must speak up for human rights. It's who we are. I said, look, you know, Chinese leaders, if you know anything about Chinese history, it has always been the time when China has been victimized by the outer world is when they haven't been unified at home. The central principle of Xi Jinping is that there must be a united, tightly controlled China. And he uses his rationale for the things he does based on that. I point out to him, no American president can be sustained as a president if he doesn't reflect the values of the United States. And so the idea, I'm not going to speak out against what he's doing in Hong Kong, what he's doing with the Uyghurs in western mountains of China, and Taiwan trying to end the one China policy by making it forceful. I said, and by the way, he said he gets it. And President Obama wanted us to get to know one another because he was going to be the president. And I came back and said they're going to end their one child policy because they're so xenophobic they won't let anybody else in, and more people are retired than working. How can they sustain economic growth when more people are retired?
When you talk to him, though, about human rights abuses, is that as far as it goes in terms of the U.S., or is there any actual repercussions for China?
China is trying very hard to become the world leader. But it's much more complicated than that. I shouldn't have tried to talk China policy in 10 minutes on television here.
Mr. President, I believe this is the best time to reset our policies and to work jointly for a peaceful and prosperous world. We all welcome now His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China.
Difference in itself is no cause for alarm. What does ring the alarm is arrogance, prejudice, and hatred. It is the attempt to impose hierarchy on human civilization, or to force one's own history, culture, and social system upon others. There must be global action, global response, and global cooperation to build small circles or start a new Cold War and take down barriers to trade, investment, and technological exchanges.
Doesn't work. So have they involved you? Have they asked you your opinion? Have you been asked to be a part of Davos? I mean, I know the average person is always over in Davos. I mean, this year, because of COVID, did you make it to Davos? They're not talking about people. This is a propaganda campaign to make people feel better. But what are they talking about? They're talking about more global regulation. We are an oligarchy today.
As we make the world healthier, is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible?
For somebody who's just tuning in and they're like, okay, really? Make your best case.
United Nations Agenda 21 is about inventory and control, and it's inventorying and controlling everything, so all aspects of your life.
What do you say to somebody who is just saying you're a conspiracy freak?
Well, the problem, of course, is that Agenda 21 is not named Agenda 21. When you're looking at it locally, it's sustainable development, and so they can easily say that they don't know anything about it because they don't see it called Agenda 21. It's not a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy fact.
Student loans are crushing my family, friends, and fellow Americans.
Me too.
The American dream is to succeed, but how can we fulfill that dream when debt is many people's only option for a degree? We need student loan forgiveness beyond the potential $10,000 your administration has proposed. We need at least a $50,000 minimum. What will you do to make that happen?
I will not make that happen.
You have, over the years, over your career, you've already spent a great deal of time at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, except now you're living there and you're president. It's been 4 weeks. What's it like? How's it different?
Look, it's, I've only been president 4 weeks. And sometimes, because things are moving so fast, not because of burden, it feels like 4 years. At this hour, our democracy is under an unprecedented assault, unlike anything we've seen in modern times. An assault on the citadel of liberty, the Capitol itself. What we're seeing are a small number of extremists dedicated to lawlessness. This is not dissent, it's disorder. It's chaos. It borders on sedition. And it must end now.
And they just got out of session. I walked in the back. All of a sudden, I found myself in the chamber, and I was stunned. I walked up, sat down, the presiding officer's seat. Guy grabbed me by the shoulder, said, "You're under arrest." That same guy, cop, said to me, "Senator, you remember me?" And I said, "Geez, I don't." He said, "I arrested you 9 years ago."
Wow. You're anonymous. We are legion, united as one, divided by zero. We do not forgive, we do not forget. Expect us.
No expression, hide my head, I wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kinda funny, I find it kinda sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Large and open.